Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Tom, Stu, and You podcast, episode 36 with Tom, Stu, and our guest, Austin Sawyer.
Nice.
Oh,
it's a good way
man.
to return after
That's
a summer
amazing.
hiatus.
We are alive.
Oh, how are y'all doing, fellas?
Very
Yeah,
good.
not bad. It's been a while. Nice
It
to
has
see you, Austin.
indeed. Has
Nice to
indeed.
see you. I guess long time no see to Stuart
Long
as well.
time no see you.
Long time, yeah. What's it been like?
Yeah, exactly.
A month? Has it been that long?
Mm.
Nah, like 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm back in Banff now, everyone. Welcome. Yep, surprise. I did not end up moving to Revelstoke like the original plan was because apparently everyone decided that now that schooling and work is online, why doesn't everyone live in the mountains?
Oh, is that why? Yeah.
That's
Revelstoke
why.
is a popular place.
It looks pretty from the Instagram. Yeah,
Excuses.
it's my own fault, really. Let's be real. So, which is wonderful because it is a beautiful place to live. It's just annoying that the winter I decide to move, everyone else decides to do the same thing too.
To scupper your plans.
Yeah, exactly. I know. Can't the whole world just revolve around me for like 1 minute, please?
So we've had a summer hiatus on the podcast, and we're going to discuss, I guess, the reason why we had that summer hiatus today, because you guys went on an epic road trip, I believe, and we'd love to hear all about it. So tell us all about it. How did it come about? Have you been planning it? Were you planning it for months? What was the plan? What was the route? We're all keen to hear what you've been up to.
Good questions. I think it's worth noting to start with that I've probably said this in the last episode that we had Austin on, but I've known Austin for what, like 2.5 years now? I guess it's been 3 years now, technically.
Yep.
Well, 2.5 now. And we've actually spent maybe 10 days in total physically next to one another. And despite that, we both thought it would be a great idea to lock ourselves in the confines of a very small vehicle and travel from one side of the country to almost the other side. I know we didn't quite make it the whole way to East Coast, mainly because of the coronavirus bubble restricting travels there.
Okay.
And also, it was a heck of a lot of driving as it was to get from Vancouver to Toronto.
Yeah.
Which is a route we've taken.
So, Austin, did you feel like being locked in a car with Stu was a great way to get to know him even better? How did you find it? How did you bear it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it is kind of funny in the sense that we actually haven't spent a lot of time in person together, and so I think that I'm always down to talk to new people. I don't really think Stuart's a new person, but it's always cool to have trips where you get to know someone beyond the opportunity or event where you're working at. So I think that was pretty awesome. And coming about, I think I'd talked about coming to Banff for Canmore loosely in the past, and then I think the cross Canada road trip started as somewhat of a joke.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For
just
sure.
like, it would be kind of fun. And then I think when I got settled into my new position and found out that I could take 2 weeks in the summer off, it came more, okay, do you want to like skiing or road tripping? And I think Stuart, you brought up the idea of the cross country road trip, and then I roped in one of my best friends, Branson from Victoria as well, because it would be cool to kind of add one more person to the mix. But
just in case we didn't get along. Just in case.
Yeah. Well, I think on any trip, it's kind of nice when you can have like a third person's perspective, or even I think 4 is a really good number too, because you can kind of all stay together as one, but then you can also kind of go off in your little groups and have really diverse conversations and stuff and relate to one another. So yeah,
I think it was good because I am by far an introvert, and I have always noticed, especially within myself, that like when I don't get time alone, I need to recharge by having time alone. Like I become grumpy, everything starts to really annoy me, and I just it's just this like wave of emotion just like descends over me, and I don't feel normal until I just get time to myself. So going into this, I knew it was going to be a challenge to start with. Just actually having to spend such a long time with people. Like, you can't really have that much time on your own when there's 3 guys sharing one tent and one car, and
Yeah.
Every experience together was wonderful. I mean, the other thing too was after a less than pleasant high school experience in an all boys boarding school, this was also like the only time in my life that I've spent a considerable amount of time like on a boys trip, as it was, like lads. Isn't really who I define myself as. Thankfully, Branson and Austin were cool dudes to hang out with for that long. So that was also a very nice surprise. Not, it wasn't surprise so much. Like, obviously, I wouldn't have decided to do this thing with Austin, especially if I thought we were going to have an issue. I mean, like, we still spent 2.5 weeks, like, living with each other. So
that's interesting, though. So you felt that you were like taking yourself outside of a comfort zone, kind of thing, with the trip as well.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Current Stuart has all of these ideas. Where he likes to put future Stuart in places of discomfort, which I'm sure is great for personal growth and yada yada yada, like very influencer, like millennial thing to do. But god damn, it's annoying at the time. Zone of comfort sort of expands beyond the confines of one vehicle. But no, we had a good time, and 3 was good too because it meant like one person could always sleep in the back while 2 sat at the front and usually chatted until we got to maybe the prairies when both people were sleeping.
I was the one asleep a lot of the time, but
So did you all share driving responsibilities? Were you on like a rotation system with driving with the 3 of you?
Stuart was a beast, man.
Stuart was a beast. Yeah.
I drove most of the way. You drove
Stuart drove 95%, and then
really?
I think I had one stretch where I drove for a few hours here and there, but for the most part, Stuart wanted to drive and he enjoyed it. So
yeah, I did actually enjoy it. I mean, if I hadn't been driving, I probably would have been reading my book and have been like the worst passenger ever. So I quite like driving anyway, and I felt like, especially in the prairies, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, that sort of area where perhaps they would have been the more boring drives, I actually quite enjoyed spending the whole time looking out the window, so it didn't worry me as much when the guys were sleeping in the back during a lot of those stretches. Also, like, driving's kind of fun. It keeps you awake. And also, this isn't going to be great coming from a vegan, but Starbucks has those double shot espresso energy drinks, and my god, for a road trip, they are literally life savings.
You needed them to get through the night and stuff, through the long drives and things like that.
Also, it's a good excuse, but they just taste so good. And I haven't had an energy drink in like 80 years or something since I was at university. So
it's a shock to the system.
It was a hard come down. I felt like an addict after the road trip. I didn't have an excuse now to keep drinking the energy drink, so I was devastated.
That's hilarious, man. That's good. So was the trusty car reliable at all times, or did you have any incidents where you were waiting for breakdown or getting saved and things like that? Any stories to share?
Yeah, so it's funny because when we decided to do a cross-country road trip, none of us had a vehicle to do the road trip in, and I've just lost Austin's video randomly. Hang on. A bit of a tech issue here. Tom has just taken over the full screen if you're watching us on YouTube. That was so weird. Your Skype just reset itself.
I'm not important.
No. Yeah, none of us had a vehicle to do this road trip in, so I bought a vehicle, which I had been wanting to do for a long time anyway, and I honestly don't know how I've lived life in the mountains for years without one. I may have mentioned on one of our previous podcasts how unreliable the vehicle had been within the first weekend getaway, being stuck in the middle of nowhere in BC. And then I actually did like a mini road trip to meet Austin and Branson in Vancouver. So I was away for a couple of days mountain biking and spending some time with friends in Squamish. And it actually broke down day 2 of that road trip. So overheated on the hills outside of Kamloops, stuck on the side of the Trans-Canada Highway, freaking out, basically like trying to organize a tow truck through AMA, which is like auto membership insurance, and weirdly, after like waiting for 45 minutes before even getting a tow truck organized, the car had stopped overheating, and I was able to just like putter back down the hill into town. And then a very, very expensive trip to the mechanics and a very expensive overnight stay in a hotel later. We had a car for the rest of the road trip, and there were no other issues.
Oh, really? That's good then.
No other issues.
I do like when because you posted about your breakdowns on social media, and I always thought it was so great. What a positive attitude you had about the breakdowns. That's like the greatest mentality to have about it.
Mate, you should know. Social media is fake.
Okay, during the road trip though, he'd wake us up and be like, guys, do you hear that sound? And he would just be like, no, dude, I don't hear that sound. I think he had in his head that there was like sounds that were coming out of the engine that
but getting power out the car.
I've got to sell the car because I can't trust it. Like every little sound, especially when I'm playing music and like there's like some like tin noise in the background of the music, I like pause the music and just like try to like listen out for the engine to make sure it's not bad.
That's just where you turn the music up and pretend it isn't happening, you know.
Yeah. I gotta sell it before, like it's just gonna drive me nuts otherwise. So if anyone is looking for a car located in the area of Banff and surrounds, I've just put some brand new winter tires on it. It's got a brand new oil change. Things looking good apparently.
Super reliable.
Yeah, no issues at all. Never had a problem with it. So
nice.
I thought it was cheap too. It did break down twice. But mention you heard about it on Tom's new podcast, and I'll give you 10% off.
That's the discount code.
Our first sponsor, myself. Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
But it was trusty for the rest of the trip, so that's good.
It was, and I mean, like, it fit all of our stuff in it, not super easily, but pretty well. I mean, it never felt super cramped. I obviously had the driver's seat the whole time, so I can't really say for the boys in the background with their bags, but I think the only time we felt like it was maybe packed a little bit too much was the first couple of days before I dropped off my mountain bike and some of the extra stuff that I brought along on the trip, thinking we would be way more productive at the campsites than we maybe actually were.
Yeah,
I had like exercise bands and a yoga mat, and I was like, we're gonna be stretching every day, we're gonna be doing workouts. Like, nah, like none of that happened.
It doesn't work out that way.
No, it doesn't.
So what was the route you took from Banff when you first started out? And Austin, when did you join into the?
So we started it. So I flew from Toronto to Victoria, and then did my isolation in Victoria and worked from home, and then Branson also lives in Victoria, so we set out on a Sunday and took the ferry over from the island to Vancouver, and then Stuart met us in Vancouver, and then the first day we drove all the way to Jasper.
Yeah.
And then
that's a trek.
So Stuart was like, I think it was like 8.5 hours, but Stuart was our tour guide through Jasper, Banff, and Canmore. So I guess I can let you tell us what you took us through, but
yeah. So we hooked it the whole way to Jasper, stopping obviously at like Mount Robson. We stopped a couple of other like random little towns along the way just to fill up with gas because we were probably getting around like 450 kilometers to a gas tank, just with all of our stuff in the background and 3 grown human men. Definitely decreased the range that I got in the vehicle.
Definitely.
Then we spent a couple of nights in Jasper, didn't we? So we did a few different hikes and checked out like the town of Jasper. I think it was quite funny seeing the two city boys in a small mountain town for the first time, losing their absolute minds over how good the outdoor stores were.
Yeah. Oh, my credit card was tingling. We don't like we have mech and stuff, but we don't have the quality of stores with like the Patagonia and the Arc'teryx that they had. So even especially in Banff, I was astonished at how nice the gear was. And all of a sudden, of course, I do one hike, and being a city kid, now I want the whole gear. I want So I was looking for like hiking pants and stuff like that. But yeah, the hiking stores were great. I think Edith Meadows, that hike was probably the most surreal one of the whole trip.
That was also super cool because we got right up close to a glacier and icebergs floating in a mountain lake with very little effort having to be put in. There was a lot of effort 5 hours after that to get to the top of the mountain looking down on the lake. But to actually get up close to icebergs like that is something I haven't done in Canada.
Yeah.
I'd done it a bit in Peru the last time I was there, but to get up close to a glacier and be able to see icebergs floating in the lake, and just to know that, especially for tourists, they can see climate change like very much firsthand after a 10-minute walk along a paved path.
Was that like when we went to Athabasca Glacier and you could see like, where the ice sheet had been melting year on year and they had markers and things like that? So was it kind of like Athabasca but just with icebergs?
Yeah, I mean the glacier wasn't anywhere near as big. It was just a tiny little glacier like at the bottom of some of the mountains there. I guess it just stays in shadow all year round, so it doesn't help.
Sure.
But that was super cool for me even, and that's someone who's lived in the mountains for 3 years.
Yeah, and it was cold. I stuck my head in it.
Yep.
You stuck your head in it.
Yeah. So this guy lost a bet. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So
I thought you were going to test the coldness. Don't dip your hand in. Just go straight for the head straight away.
The tourists loved it.
The whole trip, we kind of were playing like a game that me and my friends love playing back home. So it's called What Are the Odds? And then I basically just said like, okay, I'd do it out of 10. And then I think Branson gets the same number as me. And I had to walk in front of like 30 tourists and just casually dunk my entire head in the like, that was pretty funny, but it was cool. Yeah.
But it was super cold, eh?
Yeah, actually, well, when I first went to dunk my head, it was ice and I hit my forehead in the ice. And then I tried again and got it in. But yeah, I was freezing.
And also, it welcomed them quite nicely to the concept of elevation gain and doing exercise at elevation. Which, Austin, I feel like on the record now, I can apologize for the amount of work I made you do those first 2 or 3 days, getting up Edith Meadows and back down again, and then even just Tunnel Mountain in Banff. Spending 6 weeks away from the mountains and then coming back and doing my first bike ride almost killed me. So I had forgotten how tough it can be to have been living at sea level and then like very suddenly be at elevation.
So did you throw him in at the deep end? Is that what you're saying?
Literally. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a new level of feeling unfit. It was a mix, but it was wild though, because you were like, you definitely wanted to quit when we were like an hour up, because we stopped a lot just because of the breathing. I didn't necessarily feel that tired, but yeah, the breathing was just hard to get a hold of. And then of course you see mountain 10-year-olds sprinting past you being like, this is fun. That was
let's stop in 5 hours. You're like,
it almost made it more worth it though, because when you got to the top, I think it was a cool feeling for me and Branson just to know that like it felt really hard. And then you got to the top and you're like, oh, it kind of gave you more you felt better.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. I get that completely. So that was in Jasper, right? Did you see any wildlife out there? Did you have any wildlife encounters?
We saw a moose up close, didn't we? Which is something that was pretty special for all of us, because moose aren't super popular around Banff National Park for sure. Weirdly, we didn't see any bears the whole trip. Like not in anywhere in Alberta and not anywhere in Ontario, which is kind of surprising because we were driving through a fair bit of bear country, but moose was definitely the highlight because it was right next to the road.
That's cool.
Like, very much right there.
Yeah, that's ace. Like, because I remember I've seen moose in Canada twice, but it's from a huge distance. Yep. Like one time was from the highway, where it was like a bull moose swimming through Vermilion Lakes, and you could just see a silhouette on the water, basically. And then the other time was at Malign Lake. You know, when we went to Jasper, and then the kayakers scared it away when we were going to go try and find it, which sucked. But yeah, that's special to see a moose up close. So
there was some of the other stuff that I'd never seen too, the mountain squirrels and whatever you called those. I think the funniest animal experience of the entire thing was sitting in a lake in Ontario and all of a sudden hear something sprinting, and then it's a deer or an elk?
It was a
deer that is just gunning like so fast, just leaps through the person path and just starts swimming and just swims away. And we had no idea.
Like,
and it was pretty
15 meters away?
It's like probably 30 feet away.
Yeah. 10 meters away, yeah.
It was and
we're in the middle of a campground. Like, there's a lot of people it had to get through to get to this lake. And the campground was kind of busy. I know it was like middle of the day, so some people would have been away, but it was just the most rant because we were just like laughing, filming ourselves with a GoPro, like frolicking in the beach, like being super out there. And we just like turn around and this dude's just like sprinting towards us, and then it's a massive lake, so it just like swam like at least 400 meters and just disappeared around the corner down this river. Like we don't know where it went to or why it was in such a hurry.
Did it look like it was running away from some sort of predator or something?
Nope.
It was just someone.
Just in a hurry.
Yeah, it was weird. It was very weird.
That's interesting.
But Austin, like especially coming from the city, I mean, we've probably both forgotten, Tom and I, the magic of being in the mountains a little bit. I mean, I obviously still love it a lot, which is why I'm still here. But like, what is that feeling you first had, especially when you were standing on top of that mountain in Edith Meadows? Like, how does it feel to like be 1,500 meters above the surrounding area and just looking out over like pretty pristine nature and like just such a very different environment to what you're used to, even coming from Victoria and how flat Vancouver Island is.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty surreal getting to the top and realizing it isn't a painting, and everything around you is just amazing. Even though, like the little things, rocks that were up there that I'd never seen, and it was just amazing. Kind of just sat speechless up there for about 5 minutes at the very beginning, just kind of taking it in, and then I guess realizing that it was in your own backyard. I think that was one thing that shocked me because I don't live that far away from those sites, and it's interesting how many people that live in BC haven't been to those. And it puts it into perspective. If I would have done it earlier, I probably would have done that every year, if not from like a young age. So it was pretty cool to see that and not only experience it myself, but show it to my friends being like, have you guys seen this? This is like 6 hours away from where we live. You need to do this. Yeah. So that was cool. And it was cool to see the personalities of people. At the top of Edith Meadows, there was where's that guy from? Some random accent from.
Yeah, he said it was from some tiny little place in Alberta, right?
Yeah, and it was an interesting mix between people who were on these crazy adventures and going across Canada like we were, to people that were just doing a weekend hike. It was very. I think we saw some people on honeymoons and stuff. It was pretty cool to see just the range of why people were up there.
That's cool. Has the experience made you feel like you'll try and get out to those places more and more?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that now it's probably a lot more of a priority because the trips that I've done in the past are very much like go to Mexico or backpack in Thailand or something like that. And I never thought about exploring Canada before this for one of my vacations because you always downplay where you live. And I think it was almost more epic than anything I'd seen internationally, which was pretty surreal. And definitely I want to make at least one trip a year, the camping, hiking experience that was active. Because it's such a different break from, for example, like going and drinking on a beach in Mexico, and it was more rewarding at a younger age. And I think that being in this younger age category, still being fit, or at least I thought I was fit before this.
It's elevation, man. It's elevation.
Yeah, you're able to kind of push the boundaries of doing the like 2-day insane 20-hour hike. Yeah. So it definitely puts a priority on these type of things earlier on in life, I feel like.
Awesome, man. Do you feel like it's give you a different perspective on work-life balance and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I think that seeing the people in Alberta and BC, where I'm from, Victoria, people have a pretty good work-life balance. Yeah. But obviously living in Toronto now, it's definitely a rat race. And seeing people that do that every weekend as a priority was something that was pretty crazy to me, or just wild that was a possibility because you live that close to it, but also just prioritizing time for things like that. Because a lot of people in the big city think that people that hike mountains are the people that, like that is what they do for a living. But when you're actually meeting the people up there, like they have a wide variety of professional careers. They just prioritize that kind of stuff more than someone in like hyper professional settings. So I think that it was cool to see the people that had the work-life balance to be able to prioritize doing things like that, and B, just to see people that were satisfied with just going on a hike and being in the present. Because one of the things I was saying before was when you live in a city like Toronto, everyone's constantly thinking the future. How can you predict the future? How can I be better now to get better in the future? And really everyone on a trip is living in the present. So it's a much different mindset. And it's pretty calming, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. That's interesting, man. Definitely.
It is. I mean, Austin and I, we had a lot of these discussions on the trip about not so much like who's living life better, but just comparing the two very different lifestyles that we both live. Austin especially is like very hyper focused on success and like working hard and like getting to the top of his chosen career. And having sort of like done that earlier in my life and then having pretty much like an entire identity crisis and then becoming the person I am now, it was interesting to see like that mindset again, because I'd almost like forgotten that side of humanity a little bit, in that it's easy to put them down to say like, well, yes, they're thinking about the future. They're only thinking about the future of themselves as opposed to thinking about the future of like all of us together. And it's an interesting discussion to have, as opposed to like us having come to any conclusion about which is better. But you know, people on trips are very much like living in the present, and then people living in the mountains, while they think about themselves personally, maybe a little bit less than people in the city about like, how do I become more successful in whatever it is I'm doing? You know, they're more content with work-life balance and making sure that it is very much a balance, if not more fun and less work. Like a lot of the people living in the mountains, and you know this, Tom, because we went to a lot of these discussions, are very focused on nature and environmentalism and you know, that side of things, as opposed to more politics and business and economy and that side of society, I guess. So somewhere in the middle where we can both sort of think about the role that each other plays in where we want to take our future as a society, I think is going to be important.
Yeah, that's good. It sounds like the trip gave you both time to sort of slow down, be in the present, as you've said, have these discussions. Stu, you just talked about, you know, your previous, you know, the previous work that you used to do, and you used to have a similar kind of lifestyle. Did those discussions and did the experience make you feel like you definitely made the right choice, or for you with what you're doing?
No, and I wish it had. I think as we were driving through Ontario, and obviously we've been together for 10 days or so at this point, I think, and getting closer to Toronto and getting towards a closer of our road trip aspect of the overall trip. Austin was saying to both Branson and I, you know, that's just like being in a place like Toronto is almost motivating in itself. You know, just being in the rat race unconsciously puts you in that frame of mind. And it was interesting being back in Toronto, and even though things were obviously very different with the COVID situation, and it wasn't as busy and it wasn't as usual, like we weren't doing the usual things you would do in a big city, you were still seeing people in the rat race. You were still seeing people in suits and everyone like hurrying to work at 8 a.m. in the morning, or if you're Austin, 6:30 in the morning. And it definitely does have an influence on the way you think about things. And I think that's why where you decide to live should and does play such an important role on your mentality and approach to life. Because I know I've always questioned my decision to, not always, but like throughout the 3 years I've been living in a mountain town, I have questioned my decision to live here as to whether or not, like, is this really the best for me? Like, does this align with my values? Am I doing the work I want to be doing to get to where I want to in life? And being back in Toronto, while it was awesome for motivation, and I spent a couple of days staying with Austin, like looking for jobs and getting motivated to, you know, find a career again, as opposed to some of the less productive jobs I'd been doing in the mountains. I also knew that I needed to leave after that week. and it felt good to be returning to a mountain town. What this trip I think has really shown me is that a lot of the values that I have for myself and where I want to take my career in life is now much more possible than I thought it was before this trip, in terms of everything going remotely, and that's one of the positives for Corona, I guess, from COVID, has had on my life anyway. Not that there's many positives for a lot of people, but that a lot of the work that I had always knew I wanted to do, but I couldn't quite put a finger on what the actual job was. I didn't know. I didn't know what the actual job was I was looking for. I sort of knew what impact I wanted, but I didn't know what that job was. And it turns out it's digital campaigner for non-profit. So, it's a great combination of graphic design work, being creative, but then also having a positive experience on marketing a certain non-profit towards people and trying to get them to donate money, to show them the impact of signing petitions and messaging their politicians and changing politics, sort of from that non-profit side of things. If I hadn't felt that need to almost join the rat race again and jump back on board and start doing research, then I probably wouldn't have ever found that as a career choice for me. And I got as far as being interviewed and one of the final two for a position that was based remotely, but that I just missed out on because of a lack of experience. So that's something I'm now working on over this winter, and I can do that thankfully from a mountain town where I get to enjoy outdoor living while also still putting my life back on a career trajectory, I guess.
Nice. That's good. So, Stu, you kind of got a bit of motivation out of the trip, in a sense. And Austin, you kind of almost went the other way a little bit and noticed that you had to take some time for yourself and things like that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's always like I was telling you guys before, I don't think I've had that much time off in 5.5 years. So I don't really think I've ever had, or whenever you take, 4 or 5 day breaks, I think everyone always has the guilt of you should be doing work and you never fully get out of it. But taking 2 weeks off is obviously you get in that frame of mind. And so it definitely put into perspective, both from Stuart's experiences and going into the towns and cities that we did, that having a work-life balance is important. And I think more so just the being satisfied with where you're currently at. You can be the guy or the female who really drives and can push your career to the next level, but it doesn't have to be at this insane psychotic level. It can, you can really balance it out and take time for yourself. And I think beyond that you actually are more productive when you try having that work-life balance. It turns out to be better for you in your work life, because if you do 12 hours of, grind work and you don't have a reset, you're eventually going to burn out. And even if you have a really high tolerance to burnout, it doesn't matter if that's 6 months or 5 years, you're probably going to burn out and then realize that you didn't really get better at anything else. And also in that, if the thing that you're grinding towards ends up not being your passion, then all of a sudden you might have a midlife crisis. So I think that by slowly, even though you can really prioritize and boost yourself forward and, work those long hours and be in the grind, you can still fit in the lifestyle that I saw in those towns, even though it's way less. You can still incorporate the qualities that those people are putting forward.
Yeah, and I think society as well is seeing a bit of a change too, where everything doesn't have to be 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. You must wear a suit, you must be in the office, you must be doing this, you must be at your desk just to prove that you have value and to prove that you're actually doing work. Even Austin doesn't wear suits to work, which I think is sick, even though he's in an awesome job for someone of his age and someone on his career trajectory. And so just seeing little things like that as well sort of showed me that it's not like it used to be when I was an accountant at a big 4 firm in a major city in Australia. There is a middle ground somewhere in there. Now, I know this is probably shocking a lot of people, and my mum's probably having a heart attack right now as she listens to this. So I just also want to point out that I still don't believe in capitalism. I think the whole thing's fucked. I think we shouldn't be doing the hustle lifestyle. I think we put too much priority on having to earn a lot of money, even though for a lot of people, their end goal is to just have money as opposed to have experiences along the way. And I feel very proud to have been able to be the one to show Austin that while he was young, he should be prioritizing like nature trips and camping trips and hiking trips, and then he can like get drunk on a beach in Mexico when he has more money and he's older and all inclusive, like actually goes further, I guess. So that's something.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So I guess what was your favorite place on the trip, Austin?
Ooh, I would say my favorite place to hike around and travel would probably be Jasper. If I had to live, probably Canmore, I would say. Yeah, I just really, really loved Alberta. So I would say probably those two. I would do that trip every year to Banff, Canmore, and Jasper if I could. Yeah. And it would always be different. Like there's still stuff to do. The other places were pretty. Don't get me wrong in the fact that like Saskatchewan is pretty in its own right. Manitoba's like Ontario is Ontario. It's pretty. They don't have the hikes, but the campgrounds are still beautiful. But yeah, I'd definitely say probably Jasper to visit and Canmore if I had to stay longer.
Nice. How about you, Stu? Did you find any new favorite places?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I do find it's funny to hear Austin and Branson's perspective about the places I have been living for 3 years. Yeah. And it was good now that I'm like back in Banff, even though that wasn't originally my plan. Just to have had them here and like renewed my interest in this place to say like, oh, these are actually like why I feel lucky to be living here.
So you could see it with fresh eyes, kind of thing.
I see it with a lot more the fresh eye perspective as opposed to maybe a little bit of the pessimistic view. I mean, it also helps that it's not as busy as it usually is here, and I mean, there's also something to say about the fact that like Austin and Branson visited as visitors with me to set them up with friends and to like show them around and like be a personal tour guide as opposed to some of the challenges, I guess, being a local and like with housing and the small town politics and that sort of things that I didn't enjoy living there. But in terms of like my favorite places, we didn't actually stop that much in on the Ontario campgrounds on the way across just because we were running out of time, and I think it was important to show Branson Toronto city living. But on my way back across the country, when I drove back on my own, I spent quite a few days in some more of the remote campgrounds in Ontario, and pretty much the whole of North Ontario in fall is now my favorite place on earth, just because it's so beautiful. It can be so remote if you go to the right places, and like I'd never done any sort of like decent kayaking through national parks before. I had a canoe back home in Oz that I just went around on a dam at the farming, and I'd done a couple of small little like few hour kayaking things here and there. But in North Ontario, I stayed in this national park and I kayaked like for a full 2 days. Nice. And it's stunning. Like it's crazy to think that it's still that untouched in a country like Canada, where obviously it's not untouched by the First Nations people. But it's pretty much the same sort of like harsh environment that the first settlers would have experienced trying to set up trapping routes through Canada. And that was pretty special to be a part of, and to see the history and to hear about it, and like to literally see the landscape as it was when they saw it.
Definitely.
But I also have to say, the Trans-Canada is possibly one of the best things Canada's ever done for the country, in that it really does make the whole country way more accessible than any other country I've traveled before, especially because it is such a big country. Obviously, my advice to everyone is to get off the Trans-Canada when traveling through the provinces, especially places like Saskatchewan and Manitoba, where you really see nothing. You stick on the highway, you just see the fast food places, the pretty standard ones. A&W all the way, but
Subway.
And Subway. Yeah. Subway has some reach, man.
Yeah. Subway has the farthest reach of any. It's confirmed officially. They have the farthest reach of any consumer fast food restaurant ever.
Yeah. They're just everywhere.
They're literally everywhere.
We stopped in this tiny little town called Leader in Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
Population of what, like 100?
Yeah,
Maybe. Their tourist attraction is these fake sculptures of enlarged animals that they just have scattered around the town.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
So it's super random because it's a big farming town, basically. Like, I don't know why they need a tourist attraction. No one's going there for a tourist attraction. Let's be real. I don't know how we ended up there, to be honest. We just hop, skipped, and jumped from Drumheller down to Regina, and somehow ended up in Leader along the way.
Yeah.
And there was a Subway just in the middle of this town. Obviously, with none of the vegan options. Like, they had no falafel or Beyond Meat products, which the lady serving us behind the counter like seemed very apologetic for when I asked, which is funny because I was like, oh, like I didn't expect that to be. I just wanted to ask, and she was like, no, like you see, like they did try, we really did try, but it's just not really the demographic out here.
There was when we were in there was one lady working, and there's us three and one other guy in the shop, and her coworker had gone for a Slurpee, and she comes running back and she's like, oh my goodness, I shouldn't have gone for a Slurpee. This is busy. Like, freaking out that there was 4 people in Subway. And so like, relax, it's fine. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
But it was just funny to see that aspect of things too.
Especially because we'd been in Subway in Jasper a couple of days, 5 days earlier, and there was a line of like 50 people in this little tiny Subway line, and there was about 7 employees working the line, and they would just smash and subs out quicker than I've ever seen before.
Yeah.
So funny, isn't it? It's just different perspectives, isn't it?
Completely different.
Yeah. Sure. Do you feel like you both got a greater appreciation? I mean, you've probably just scratched the surface of like traveling across Canada, because as you say, you couldn't get further out east and stuff like that. But do you feel like you got a greater appreciation or knowledge or understanding of Canada as a country and things like that?
Yeah, I would say I can't say we look too much into the history of like each province, but I think from a landscape perspective, definitely. Yeah. And definitely way more about the capital cities. That was pretty cool to see kind of the capitals of everything, and to look at, the capital of BC compared to the capital of Ontario, like what? So that was cool. And in terms of people, I think that was the most interesting thing for me, was just the interactions between people, and, are they warm? Are they cold? Are they friendly? Are they not? The conversations that people are having from an observation point of view. I think that was one of the coolest things, was just the personalities and people that come along with living in certain locations.
Yeah. Okay, so where for you was the friendliest place in Canada?
Victoria, BC. I don't know. I think it's hard to even answer that question in the current circumstances.
For sure.
I'd say Victoria is probably the friendliest place that I've been in Canada, but discounting that, I don't know. I feel like every campsite we went to, people were nice. Especially in Ontario, some of the people were pretty nice. Besides that one guy that wanted us to get out of our campsite. I would say, I don't know. What do you think, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough with COVID. Like, we weren't really meeting that many people, and even at campsites, we weren't introducing ourselves to the people near us. It was just sort of like seeing people and hearing the laughter and like that sort of thing, I guess, to try to go off. I mean, I think a lot of the small towns are pretty welcoming.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone we did meet was very curious to hear about a cross-country road trip, which I think is funny because I think living in a small town, especially in the Bow Valley where it is very tourist-based, like, we hear about people doing cross-country road trips all the time. Like, it's just a thing that people do. And it was a little jarring, to be honest, just to how many people were surprised that was something we had decided to do. Because for a lot of people, like, it's not something they ever consider. Like, the furthest they may go is a couple of hours away for a camping trip for for a long weekend, for example. Yeah, to go across the whole country, as Austin said, like, it's not something you ever think about doing in your own backyard, which I think is sad, because Canada is one of the best countries I've ever visited, and I visited view now. In just that it's so diverse and every province has something completely different to the other, and you can have these super incredible experiences that are completely different the next day when you travel somewhere else.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong, it's a long drive, and it's definitely not something you should be doing in 3 or 4 days.
Yeah. Yeah, I did that once. I drove from Calgary to Tofino for a weekend, which was a long drive. It's a long drive, but it was worth it. And as you say, you can see, all the different landscapes, and Tofino is a beautiful place as well. Looking out on the Pacific Ocean was like something I'll never forget. So yeah, that was good times. You touched on it briefly a moment ago, but how was traveling amidst the coronavirus pandemic? Was it easy to get around? Did you notice any difference between, perhaps the more rural spots and the cities and things like that? Did you get any judgment at all and things like that for the things that you were doing? Were you in a bubble?
Yeah, I think I can. Yeah, it was an interesting, at least from our perspective. Like when we first decided to do it, I think that we had a very rational view of how to make it safe. And when you publicly display that you're going to do something, I think people don't necessarily read into how you're going to go about it. It's just kind of the surface level view of you're doing a trip. That's the same as an international flight. Oh my God, what are you doing? So I guess in that aspect, like for everyone listening, we were definitely safe about it. Like I flew back to Victoria and did my isolation and then got tested. And then we left, all three of us, not having the coronavirus, and stuck to our car and the woods for 99.9% of literally everything. I mean, don't get us wrong, we went into cities to drive around and see it and, walk around sometimes and do some shopping. But I don't think there was a single place along the road trip that I felt less safe than I do in Toronto. And I felt like we took precautions to make sure that was the same for everyone around us as well. In terms of traveling, because we were outdoors so much, I don't think any of us really noticed a difference. When you're camping in the middle of the woods, it's like it doesn't really exist, which again was nice in its own art. Even though we should care about it, it was nice to get away from those kind of conversations for a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. What did you think, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting coming from Banff and Canmore, where we've had very few cases this whole time. Obviously, in March and April when it first hit, we very much locked down very hard. We weren't very accepting of people coming from out of town, even just from Calgary, which caused a lot of friction back in that time. And then as the summer has progressed, even with tourism opening back up again, it's a lot more relaxed here in the Bow Valley than I noticed in Toronto, for example, for sure. And I think if you look at that from a rational perspective, it comes down to a risk analysis where there's less people, and even though some of them are tourists, the chances that one of them having it is much less just because there's physically less people around. Obviously, the risk is increased a little bit by having tourists from out of town, but foregoing a full-scale lockdown where travel is restricted from everywhere and everything. It was very interesting to see that difference for sure. I think people were taking it a lot more seriously in Toronto. I definitely saw way more masks. I mean, it's definitely in the Bow Valley, like masks are now recommended everywhere. So anytime you go indoors, you have to be wearing a mask, which is good to see because in some of the places, especially in the middle of the country, that wasn't a thing. As Austin said, like we were probably more cautious than most people in a lot of those places just because we knew that there was a slightly higher risk of, if we were to get it somehow, we didn't want to be the ones carrying it around the place. So we were wearing masks even when it wasn't necessary. We were washing our hands all the time. We had so much antibacterial soap in the car. It's not funny. Like we went through bottles and bottles of the stuff, and we really weren't interacting with many people at all. So I felt safe doing it. Austin and Branson both felt safe doing it. But yeah, as we you definitely do get hate from a lot of people who don't see it as any different from international travel, for example. But I knew that we weren't interacting with anyone that was high risk at all along the way, and we were extra cautious because of that. But as you say, like I saw even less people than I would do in Banff and Canberra here, and that's already a small place with a very minimal risk of contracting it. So in terms of that, I think we were safe. In saying that, I'm very happy I left Toronto when I did, because it has gone into a very hard lockdown in the days after I left. So I timed it very well.
Talk about timing, eh? So it's locked down in Toronto now, is that right?
Yeah, so gyms are closed, restaurants are closed, work is 50-50. Masks everyone wears them everywhere. Like even outside, you never really see a person without a mask, or it's pretty rare now to do that. Public transit is sparse. I think people take it when they need to, but mostly like Uber or taxi or walking. So I think it's a good mix. I mean, definitely it's more locked down. Does it feel less unsafe? I mean, there's definitely more cases and you're more aware of it, but I think that it's woken a lot of people up that it's not going away having a second lockdown. And so in the grand schemes of public awareness, I think that people have actually smartened up now, or at least the general public, maybe not the hooligans, but like the general public has definitely become more self-aware on how we can try and function with this thing actually going on.
Yeah, it's a good point, because it doesn't look like it's going to go anytime soon, or that there's going to be any sort of vaccine coming. So, and obviously life has to continue in some way. So the best thing we could probably do is just be cautious and use common sense and things like that, which it sounds like you guys did with the trip. Creating your own bubble and mostly being in remote areas. It sounds like hiking and things like that. So that's good. Stu, when you were in like Saskatchewan and places like that, did it remind you or bring back memories of home at all? With the farms out there.
It did a
little.
little.
Agricultural, right?
It is very. Oh, it's only agricultural. I mean, yeah. Until you literally get to the city, you don't see it coming, which is kind of weird. It's just like I guess what we had, like Moose Straw and Regina, I guess were really the only two big cities we saw in Saskatchewan. I saw Saskatoon on the way back through, but you literally like have to be in the city before you realize there's a city just in the middle of this province. It's definitely a lot more wealthy, and it's obvious that they get a lot more consistent rain than Australia. Australia's very much like outback farmland, as opposed to Saskatchewan, which is a lot more smaller farms, a bit more wealthy. Everyone has all nice new looking equipment. It is very flat. Like it does live up to the stereotype, but it's great. I think I definitely probably appreciated the prairies more than the other two guys did, just because I did have that perspective from back home. And it was harvest time, which is always a beautiful time of year because the crops are looking their best and you're seeing people running around actually doing something, as opposed to just having a farm that is just waiting for action, I guess. So that was also, it was definitely a nice time of year to be traveling the country, because you got harvest time in the prairies, and then fall, especially in Ontario, is gorgeous when you've got the beautiful orange color everywhere.
Yeah, nice.
Orange and reds and stuff. Yeah, so that was lovely.
So what did you think of the prairies and stuff, Austin?
Don't get me wrong. I thought it was like, it was pretty in its own sense. When you first got into it, I think it was very like alluring, being like, wow, okay. But I mean, by the 9th hour, I think me and Branson, both being city kids, were like, okay, we had a bit of enough of this. I think one thing I didn't talk about before after the trip that I thought was kind of cool is, from an engineering perspective, the tech that would take. Like there was one house in the middle of, hundreds of acres, and the infrastructure to be able to take care of that much crops was pretty outstanding. I saw some machines that I had to ask Stu. I didn't know what the heck they were. So from that aspect of things, it was pretty wild. I mean, I've grown up kind of on farm life because my mom grew up on a farm. And so maybe I had a tiny bit more appreciation for how much work it took to actually keep something like that alive.
Yeah.
But I tried to appreciate as much as possible. Probably not as nearly as much as Stu thought it was beautiful, but I mean, we definitely had our moments. We didn't hate it.
Yeah, I mean, we're glad we've all done it once.
Exactly.
I think I'd find it harder to convince the guys to do a road trip again a second time.
Yeah, through those. Well, I mean, okay, so if you're restricted for time, I would say that, or if you're restricted for money, I would say that probably just drive straight across Canada. If money was not an issue, I would probably have done like fly into Victoria, do the island, do Vancouver, go to Alberta, then fly to Toronto, and then do like Quebec and the East Coast. That's what I would do if money wasn't as much of a problem. I don't know about you, Stu, but
No, I think that's pretty fair to say. Like, I mean, as beautiful as I found Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and unless you're driving right along the border of the USA where a lot of the lakes are in Saskatchewan, or you're very much in the north of Saskatchewan and Manitoba, there wasn't a lot in the middle of that province that I found would draw me back for an extended period of time the second time around. So much of Ontario I did really enjoy because it can get remote very quickly, I guess, once you get more than 5 or 6 hours away from Toronto. So I might even fly to Winnipeg and then just do that drive from Winnipeg to the Ontario border and then take my time really exploring North Ontario. So I think there's still a lot there that I would like to go back and see again.
Yeah, I would do that.
Or flying to Thunder Bay. Surely Thunder Bay is an airport.
Yeah, Thunder Bay, Sleeping Giant, and Killarney were all stunning. So I would probably recommend that too. That's a good path.
I'd probably try Sleeping Giant again too, because we had a less than ideal experience in terms of our sleeping conditions at Sleeping Giant. That I feel like.
That's what happened.
We showed up. Okay, first our selection of campsite, it made no sense because we looked on a Google map and said, oh, we want to be the most exposed to the water. Let's go in this, which in all rationality, if it's windy, is probably the worst idea. So we showed up and it was dark and it was so windy and kind of raining. And we tried to put up the tent. It ripped a bunch, pretty much in half. The top of the tent ripped in half in terms of the like cover. So like my phone got water damage. Branson had the tent collapse on him and was wet the whole night. It was it was less than ideal for sure.
Character building moments though, when you've got to go through that adversity, you see.
Well, yeah, it's funny because it's a good test of, I think if you go traveling with anyone, the number one priority is seeing how they get frustrated in situations, and people with the ability to go into situations like that. And although, it sucks, it's shitty, but laugh it off and make it somewhat of an experience. I think that you found the right people to travel with if you can do that, which it very much was.
Yeah, I mean, it was almost so ridiculous that we were like laughing so hard at how silly the situation was. Like, don't get me wrong, I think we were all very pissed off during the night and then like very first thing in the morning, but after a cup of coffee and a few laughs, to pull out the pocket knife and just like cut the rain shelter in half and then tape it together so we didn't get completely soaked if it rained the next night, and then just laugh at everyone driving past our tent, pointing and laughing as well. It definitely made the highlight reel of the trip. But as Austin said, I think it definitely proved our character, and
sure,
I definitely appreciated that those two could laugh about it the next day. You know, it's definitely a tense moment when you're not quite sure how the others are going to react to it, and you're just trying to like drop a few jokes to see if they laugh, or is this a serious moment where we should be quiet?
That's good. That's great.
But in terms of like actual challenges, we didn't really have that many. Like that was definitely the biggest one.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think we got along pretty well considering none of us had done a huge road trip like that before. Like we all figured out our own food and cooking situations. We all like were easily entertained, and like we brought frisbees so we could play disc golf and stuff a lot in Alberta, and then we set up a couple of our own courses in Ontario throughout the trees, which was pretty fun to do. So, things like little things like that make the trip much more exciting, and that's probably what I remember more than the big sites that we stopped and saw along the way.
Nice. In terms of the sites that you stopped at, did you have that sort of pre-planned? Did you know where you were going to stop, or did you like reach out to people in those local communities to see what you should check out, or those kind of things?
Yeah, I think that it was an interesting methodology of us doing that. So I think one thing that we realized is that we couldn't necessarily go ask a bunch of locals, and so our strategy was to use dating apps to try and ask people where to go, which was actually very effective.
Yeah.
So
it helps that we're both very good-looking guys, right? I'll pump our tires.
Stu can claim that. So I think it was funny because it really shed light on the different side of benefits to having something like a Bumble was the best, but or Tinder, where it's not just exchange of I'm going to take you on a date. It's just here's really almost the only option that you have to look a city ahead, swipe, meet people, and say, hey, as a local, what would you suggest that we do other than these sites? So in areas once we left Alberta, I think that it was fantastic trying to, asking people in Ontario, is this Sleeping Giant place that we're going even good? And everyone saying, oh yeah, go here, do this hike. So it was pretty wild to see that. And it was, I think, effective.
Nice. Top tips for road trips.
Yeah.
Download Bumble and all these dating apps and get talking to people.
Actually, though, I would like to think some of them were disappointed that we were just looking for tips and not an actual date. But, it's COVID. Come on, they should know. They should know better. Yeah. But it actually did work better than I thought it would. And we got some great advice from it because we intentionally left a lot of our trip open just in case we did find a place we really liked. Obviously, campsites was something we had to book in months and months in advance just because everyone was booking very quickly. So I think the Sleeping Giant campsite we justified it to ourselves for saying, oh, this is sick, we're around the water, but I have a feeling it might have actually been the last campsite available for the nights we were going through. And I think
we'll blame it on that. That sounds good.
Yeah, we'll blame it on that. Yeah. And I think Killarney was the same. We had to move our campsite during the middle of the day in Killarney, because we couldn't get 2 nights back to back. But because of that, we actually had one of the funniest experiences on the trip where we had the park warden called on us because we hadn't moved our campsite before the time we had to check out. Okay. So we had gone for a quick hike in the morning, which in itself was quite funny. We'd planned on doing this massive hike and then realized it was actually 3 times bigger than we thought it was, because we hadn't realized that the approach to get to the hike was 7 k's there and back on its own. Sure. So then we very quickly changed that plan, and we get back 20 minutes before 2 p.m. and we drive past, and I drive past to go check that our new campsite is free, because obviously they didn't have to check out until 2 p.m. either. And as we're driving back, this guy is just walking up and down, pacing the road on the phone to someone, and his whole family is set up, chairs out, cooking food, just on the side of the road in this campsite. And as we're packing up our stuff, this guy comes over and starts talking to us, just being like, you need to move your stuff, you need to go. And we're like, yeah, man, we got 15 minutes, chill. And he's like, no, it's 2 o'clock. And I'm like, no, it's definitely still 1:45. He's like, well, you're going to be late. And I was like, no, we just have to move our stuff to campsite. And then the park warden rocks up, and then we have to explain the whole situation again. And basically, this guy had called the park warden for 2 o'clock because they had rocked up and checked up early and seen our stuff still set up.
Really?
He helped us carry the tent, though.
He did help us carry the tent.
He was half insulting us the whole time.
The whole time. The whole time. Yeah, it was weird because he offered to help because he wanted to move in quicker. We were like, dude, it'll take 2 minutes.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I'll help. And then the whole time he's just like, oh, you guys were going to be so late if I wasn't here. And he's like, what were you thinking? And we were like, oh, we just did a hike. So he's like, oh, I can't believe you decided to do a hike. Dude, why are you here?
That was pretty funny. Yeah.
That is pretty funny. So he was the most pushy person you maybe met on the whole road trip then? Do you reckon?
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not the most random person we met on the trip, though.
Oh, who's the most random then?
Day 1, driving to Jasper, we're just driving through this random little town in BC, and we're all chatting away. We're excited. I'm like catching up with the boys. We just like happen to glance out our side window as we're driving down the highway, and there's this guy on this little hillock with like a Halloween mask on, just dancing away.
Fair enough.
Like what's that? You know the anonymous hacker group?
Yeah.
He had the anonymous mask on, and he was just like doing crazy dance moves to like hardcore EDM music, just like twirling. And it was that was definitely the weirdest thing.
It must have been like what 2 p.m. in the afternoon. Like it was like mid-afternoon. He was in full trackies, like tracksuit, sweatpants, and stuff. Like
it just sounds like he was expressing himself.
Yeah, it was a performance. Yeah.
But he wasn't on the he wasn't on the highway collecting money or anything. He was on the side of the highway on this little hillock, like a couple of meters above the highway, just dancing for people. So that was day one of our road trip. We were like, what?
Like, this is going to be a good road trip.
We either have really good luck or questionably bad luck.
yeah.
So the whole experience, does that put you in like a mind frame to say, yeah, we're going to do a road trip again sometime in the future? Maybe do like the East Coast, or do certain bits of the trip that you've just done?
Yeah, I think that a road trip definitely we could do again. I think we'd all love to do the East Coast at the end of when we were talking, and it was nice getting to see these friends that even like Stuart had some guys that he met up with on the trip and just like did walks with that he'd connected with over the internet but never actually met. And so it'd be nice to use those connections in the East Coast and do the same thing and experience how pretty that is. Because I've been to New Brunswick, but I've never been to some of the other places, especially like PEI and Newfoundland. That would be cool. And then also, if the States does ever open up and it is reasonable, I would love to do the West Coast of the States, which I think Stuart's kind of already done a bit of. But
I've just done LA to San Fran. There's a lot more I'd like to see. Yeah, I think road tripping is definitely underrated. I think it is seeing a resurgence now, but it's almost become a thing that only van life influencers do. It's almost like unless you can do the full-on van life, then don't bother with a road trip. Which is sad because I think it was very popular, I think, in the 80s and, like before our generation, maybe even before our parents' generation. So it was weird because like you had, obviously you did have those van life influences, a couple of places we stopped. Like I saw a few, and the converted vans are pretty expensive for how long you can rent them for. Like you're paying a couple of grand just for a couple of days to rent one of those converted vans. Which kind of defeats the purpose, but whatever, each to their own. And then you obviously had people in RVs that had full-on like $100,000 setups where they were sleeping in luxury, probably with electric blankets, while the three of us were huddling in our sleeping bags on a tiny little inflatable hiking mattress in the rain, with being soaked because our rain shelter ripped apart and was being held down by a tarp and some elastic bands. So that was quite funny to see that difference, but road tripping is great as long as you have the right crew, and I think that's key. I would definitely do a trip again with both of them. Branson was obviously an unknown for me going in, just in that I literally had never met him before. He was awesome in just that he didn't need to decide anything, which usually would have frustrated me, but I think that's where 3 people were the key. So Austin and I could decide where to go, and Branson was just like fully down for whatever. And he had a sick trip. Well, I think he had a cool trip. And so that was sweet to see. But yeah, I'd definitely do East Coast again for sure. But yeah, as Austin said, like I had met a bunch of people online throughout COVID. So like someone like Peter, the videographer we had on a couple of episodes ago, Kaylee, who we had on for the feminism episodes, way back when, and then the girl who actually like was the first person I met, who is a friend of Jesse's, who then introduced me to both Kaylee and Peter. I met all 3 of them at socially distant catch-ups in Toronto. So that was possibly the coolest part of the road trip. Sorry, Austin and Branson, was that I actually got to meet these friends of mine that I've been talking to for the last 6 months purely online, and having never met them before, we were able to see that like, we could actually be quite good friends in real life as well as just online friends as well. So that was really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, because I was going to ask you if, because obviously some of the people we have had on the podcast, we've, live out in Toronto or on the route of the road trip. Wabi as well.
I saw Wabi as well. Yeah.
Wabi, yeah. So it's great that you got to connect with those people. I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. It was really. Obviously they were cool people, which is why we had them as guests on our podcast. But they're actually really super nice. Can confirm they're super nice people in real life as well. It's always a bit of a concern, isn't it? Am I about to be catfished by someone? But
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, that's good. So, did you record the trip in any way, Stu? Have you got things?
Do we have a lot of
footage? My gosh.
Is it going to take a while? Where can we see it? When can we see it, do you reckon?
I am not committing to anything on record right now.
It's coming to a film festival near you, December 1st.
2023. Yeah.
It'll be worth the wait.
It was definitely a well-documented trip. I mean, thinking back now, we probably could have done more vlogging style things where we introduced a lot more what we did. But I also didn't want it to be a vlog either because I knew that's not my thing, I guess. But yeah, I have something like 600 gigabytes, I think, of photo and video to go through. Thousands and thousands and thousands. Yeah. So the photos will be on my Instagram probably in the next 2 months. Nice. About then? Yeah, so what's it? October, November? Yeah, so maybe December 1st. Look out. Yeah, as winter is happening, all of the summer stuff will be on my Instagram because I haven't posted there for about 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm back, baby. Creativity is at an all-time high.
I feel recharged, refreshed.
Refreshed, yeah.
The way of filming too, I kind of felt the same. Within Canada, I think I wanted it to be a little more documentary style and less bloggy. But if I was to go internationally, even when I backpacked, I wished that I would have done a little bit more blog style things, not necessarily to end up in the end video or product, but to just give myself context onto what I was doing.
Yeah, definitely.
I don't know, Canada's just so beautiful that I think it's gonna be some cool videos or videos. I don't really know yet. It's been a huge summer. I've done a lot of adventuring this summer, which is something that I can't possibly be more thankful for. Having moved to another country, I finally feel that after 3 years, I finally have the knowledge, the connections. I have a vehicle, I have the gear. I have no money, but I have bought the things over the last 3 months to get me to a place now where I can finally enjoy the lifestyle that I had moved here wanting to live. And
nice.
Now that I've spent such a long time with Austin and having been in Toronto, I am now motivated as well to get back on that career track I get. Get back to work-life balance as opposed to just a little bit of work and mostly life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good, man. That's good. And but so that's one of the things that has come out of coronavirus, isn't it? Because you say that you want to work remotely with people working from home and things like that, and it's shown that people can do that, and so that surely feeds into what you want to do, and you can sort of take that forward.
Yeah, I just need to get the experience without the job. But I need the experience to get the job. But I need the job to get the experience. So I'm volunteering this winter. Yeah. So I'm just making sure I have enough of an income to be able to live for the next 6 months. And then once I have that secured, which hopefully I will have in the next couple of weeks, I'll then be looking to volunteer for some of these nonprofits as we look to get some of that campaigning experience.
Absolutely.
Which is good because, as you've just seen in the recent New Zealand election, the Greens are making a comeback. So hopefully that is represented in a lot more of the politics going forward over the next few years. So hopefully I'm jumping on board at the right time as well.
Nice, that sounds good. And Austin, how about you after the trip? What are your plans post road trip? Working on anything new?
Oh, me, yeah. Just a lot of work. There's a lot of exciting things. I think there's going to be some pretty exciting updates in a month and a half that I can't necessarily say right now. But I think we've lucked out in a sense, being a startup where we've prioritized our network of people and really spreading the word of what we're doing and attracting really, really talented collaborators early, when I think a lot of other people would have focused primarily on the tech and not think that those things are important. And our team is looking stacked. So I'm very, very excited that we're in a place now that we are hitting the ground running and we can do some pretty exciting developments. So I think there's a lot of infrastructure to set up in terms of the company and kind of where it's going to go. But I think that we're going to have some pretty awesome stuff to show next year in terms of medical devices that will actually disrupt what's out there right now.
Nice. So stay tuned, eh? And you'll have to come back on when you can talk about them more.
Yeah, I would love to. I mean, it's very exciting to be involved, but it's very hard not to talk about sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
Because you're killing it.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just happy to be back doing the podcast, to be honest. Much as the break was definitely necessary, which, you know, for some people can seem like a bit of a cop-out, and yeah, maybe it's a convenient excuse, but 35 episodes means that we had been doing one episode every week for quite a long time.
Yeah, and it's a lot of work goes into each episode, like especially like prepping for it, and then on your side, because you do most of the technical stuff, technical wizard over there. Like that's another
Don't say
job.
That. Don't say that. I thought I had the tech sorted, and I'm looking at the raw footage right now, and it is not working the way I hoped. So that's my afternoon planned, is syncing up some video and audio.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the break's been good for, you know, looking back on what we've done, and also like coming up with fresh ideas. So yeah, stay tuned because we're back to doing the podcast, and it should be good.
Indeed, absolutely. And Austin, this has been awesome for you to be able to join us, my man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys. Yeah, it's always a pleasure. I think what you guys are doing is really cool. So glad to be a part of it.
Thanks for the road trip, Branson.
Oh, no worries.
Branson, if you ever listen to this, Branson, yeah, thank you, my man. Thanks for keeping us entertained, for sure. And if you have any questions for us, you can find us on the tomstewandyu.com website. Otherwise, see you next week.
Oh, you haven't done that for a while, have you? Yeah. That's all right. Yeah, Instagram at tomstewandyu, Facebook at tomstewandyu. You know, drop us a like, a comment, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Austin, it's always great, and thanks so much for sharing your experiences.
Thank you very much. Always a pleasure.
Until next time, guys.
Yeah.
Bye.
Goodbye.